And let me tell you, I like video games. Like, really like video games. Ever since I had begun my descent into the world of gaming, though, one thing has always fascinated me: multiplayer video games. Not just the playing Mario Kart in the same room with your friends and family type of multiplayer, though, online multiplayer too. The fact that I can play a game of Super Smash Bros. With a friend in California, or hop into a Roblox game with completely random people from all around the world, is simply amazing. But how does it all work? That question isn't a simple one or two sentence answer, as there's many different ways to run multiplayer video games. From a host server run by a big company, to a server that can be run on anyone's laptop or PC, to not needing a host server at all. There are many unique ways to have a multiplayer gaming system function, each with their own pros and cons. So to start this video off, what is a video game server in the first place? For a video game to be played with multiple people, ideally you need a way to constantly share information about game and players, no matter the physical distance you are away from the players of the game. This makes it so you can see other players move and interact with the game, and other players can see you do so too. There are many ways to host a server for a video game, some better suited for playing with friends no matter where they are in the world, and some that are mostly for playing together in the same room. However, all methods of hosting a game rely on a stable internet connection, as the internet is the main way to send information wirelessly to other machines. Multiplayer video games can be unique in how their multiplayer functions or servers are coded, but most of them all fall into three major categories, those being dedicated servers, listen servers, and peer-to-peer connection. These three types of servers or connections is what I will be discussing today, talking about how they generally work, common situations they are used in, and the pros and cons of each one. The first option for playing a multiplayer game is to play it on a dedicated server. A dedicated server is exactly what it sounds like, a server that is dedicated to running a multiplayer game. This server can be remote, like in more competitive games like Call of Duty and Overwatch, or it can be local, like in the case of a community-run Minecraft server. Having a remote dedicated server that is run by the company that makes the game can be very convenient, but depending on the game, that might not be an option, or a non-official server might be a better fit for a group's goal in playing the game, as in the case of a Minecraft server that is run by a community. Either way, the main idea is that there is a device where its entire job is to send, receive, and send again data about the game and players of the game. Typically, games already have player download much of the data of the game, and all the server has to do is send and receive information about other players so they can interact. That's the goal of playing a multiplayer game after all, interacting with other players with hopefully little to no latency or lag. One issue that may occur in this kind of hosting is that everything is reliant on this one server, so if something bad happens to that server, then players won't be able to play the game. Big companies solve this by having massive rooms of backup servers, and sometimes even backups for those backup servers. So if players get booted from one server due to a malfunction, they can hop right back on the game through one of those backups. A full crash of all the servers can happen, and does happen from time to time. This is an inevitable outcome to a system run like this, and there's little way around it. Overall, this system is great for games on gaming consoles, where there is limited processing power to run and host multiplayer games. Being able to put the majority of the data sent during a multiplayer session to an external server and distribute it as needed doesn't always work, but it is very reliable, and is used by tons of multiplayer games nowadays, especially ones where the objective is to fight another team of players with your team of players. A listen server is very similar to a dedicated server. Actually, it's pretty much exactly the same, except for how it is hosted. While a dedicated server is run by an external device, a listen server is run by a player of said game. It runs on their system, while that system is also playing the game. It still relies on the same method of sending data to a server, and the server sends data about other players back. Due to this similarity, it is also then grouped up with multiplayer servers and classifying what kind of connection multiplayer games have, but the difference between where it is hosted is enough to give listen servers their own name. One unique feature of listen servers, however, is host migration, which is the process of transferring who is hosting the game server in the instance that the current host is unable to continue hosting. Either they crash or they disconnect, etc. So, unlike dedicated servers, while the server will shut down when there is an issue, some listen server systems can instead change the location of the server to keep the game running. It's a nice system for games that you would play with friends like Terraria and Minecraft, two extremely popular games that make the process of hosting a listen server for friends easy if you are willing to put the time into it. The main issue with this method is that the host server is also being used to play the game, so it is more prone to failure and is more likely to cause connection issues than a dedicated server is, especially when you are playing with people who are farther away from the hosting player. The entire server actually is more prone to failing, and in very rare cases could actually cause damage to one's machine due to the load it is bearing being too much. It is not too worrying, as the computer should be fine if it's not left alone running the game overnight in a hot room, but I have seen someone's computer blue screen due to that exact reason. Most console games use either peer-to-peer connection or dedicated servers with their multiplayer games, so no need to worry about your Xbox or PlayStation breaking. This is mainly something to consider when you're running non-conventional multiplayer on an average or below average PC or laptop. I've used this method to play a couple games that don't exactly have user-friendly multiplayer, and I would recommend it to anyone who has a computer or laptop and is just looking to have a night of good times with some long-distance friends over a voice call. Lastly, peer-to-peer connection. In a peer-to-peer networking system, there is no host or main server. Instead, every player's machine works together to accomplish the job of a server. Data is sent back and forth still, but it's being organized by the machines that are outputting the data and are playing the game, rather than a central server. This system was designed to eliminate the need for a dedicated or listen server, and worked very well in games in the 1990s and early 2000s that used internet connections. However, as games became more complex, the issue of lag presented itself. If data is being sent by each connected machine, and is receiving the data of each connected machine, then what happens if not all the data is being sent and received around the same time? Normally a server would check this, but with every machine essentially being a server, then a little bit of latency and or lag can cause every player to become desynced from each other. Although older action games like older Halo's co-op were okay to use peer-to-peer connection, they have switched to dedicated servers and listen servers nowadays because of the need for more reliable internet connections in games. Some turn-based games, and notably some recent Nintendo games like Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, still use peer-to-peer, and that shows through these games not having the best connections. One more thing to mention is that peer-to-peer connections are easier to exploit with unintended code. This can be considered hacking, or the use of using unintended code in video games to do unintended things. Normally the host server can check if players are hacking and can prevent hacks from being used or simply disconnect them from the game. However, with no host to check for this, it is much easier to potentially have your day ruined by some tech-savvy kid with mischievous intentions on a peer-to-peer game session. Depending on the type of game being played, or the environment the game is being played in, such as playing on the same internet connection rather than playing with people around the world, peer-to-peer connection in video games can work. Its main benefit is cost efficiency, as it eliminates the need for a host server, but the connections are more prone to unstableness and cheating, although cheating isn't too much of an issue, as most peer-to-peer games nowadays are all on consoles. So, in conclusion, there's no one way to play video games with people remotely, but there are general ways that work better than others, given situations involving the power of hardware, location of players, and budget for keeping the game active. Generally, players will send data to each other in various ways so that they can interact and have good times, or bad times depending on how seriously you take the game. Now, if you excuse me, I have some games to play. Oh man.